In the book of Jubilees, which is sometimes called the Lesser Genesis, which is not in our Bible, but it's in the Ethiopian Bible, go figure, and it's also an ancient Jewish religious work of 50 chapters. It's also known as the Book of Division, and is well known with the Beta Israel Ethiopian Jews. In this book, they compared it to the Dead Sea Scrolls that they found in 5 caves in Qumran, Israel. These scrolls were all written in Hebrew, and they had different manuscripts, different books that's in our Bible written in Hebrew, like Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Exodus, and Genesis. And they had other books too, and they compared, of course, these books written in ancient Hebrew on leaves and papyrus papers. They compared it to the Ethiopians, what they had stashed away in their collection, and it was 100% accurate. This goes to show you record keeping and the heritage of the Ethiopians. Now, also in the book of Jubilees, it mentions that the name of Nimrod, spelled Nebrod, which was a Greek form of Nimrod. It states that Nimrod was the father of Azurad, which was the wife of Eber. Eber was the precursor for the Hebrews and the mother of Peleg. So on this account, this would make the Cush Ethiopian ancestry also an ancestor linked to the bloodline of Abraham, and hence all the Hebrews. And this is in the book of Jubilees, which is a Hebrew text. So basically, if Nimrod from Cush, and if Nimrod was black, and he was the father of Azurad, who was the wife of Eber, and Eber was from where the Hebrew, we get the word Hebrew, and from Eber came Abraham. This would mean that we have Ethiopian bloodline already mixed early on before Abraham was even born. So this would mean that Abraham also was black, and that he dwelt in the land of Ur, which was also the land that the Sumerians lived in, and they would have been black as well, because the word for the ancient Sumerians means black-headed people, if you do your research. And also the Chaldeans came from the land of Ur, and back then the Chaldeans essentially were black. What happened to them now is a mystery. It's a mystery. So, as I said earlier, again, the Ishmaelites, which is a descendant of Abraham, they were also Semitic, would have been black because Ishmael's mother was Hagar the Egyptian, and Ishmael's mother, who was an Egyptian, got Ishmael a wife from Egypt. And they had children. They had 12 children, which were the 12 princes of Ishmael. And the 12 princes of Ishmael spread all throughout Arabia and the Middle East. They would essentially had to been back then 3/4 black Egyptian and 1/4 Hebrew. So they would have been black. But they're not in modern day times. Here you see some pictures here of black Egyptians, paintings on the walls from over 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And we see how the Caucasian Arab Egyptians look today in Egypt, just like the Middle Easterns and Arabs look today in America. Now, the ancient name for Egypt was Kemet. Ham had a son named Mizraim. Mizraim was the initial name of Egypt, which eventually got changed to Kemet. The ancient Egyptians called themselves KM or Kam-Au, which means black people or black god people. Kemet was also another word for saying the land of black faces or black land. Here we have some pictures right here in Egypt of some Egyptian men, probably mixed with Arabic and African stock, that are dark skinned. Not the typical Egyptians we see on TV. And then we see some more pictures of the Egyptians here with brown skin and curly, kinky, woolly hair. Some more black Egyptians here that nobody knows about. Nobody shows this on TV. They obviously have melanin, they have a brown skin. Here we have the tombs of the pharaohs and the Arabs are uncovering different things and they're finding in Egypt. And as you can see on the back wall, that the people back there on the wall that they drew are brown-skinned people. Now, whether or not this has been altered or lightened or painted on, they obviously are not white in appearance. So here we have a picture of Pharaoh Sesostris the first. As you can see here, is black in appearance. Another picture right here, Sesostris, his black face. Another picture of black features with the lips and the cheekbones and the nose. Another picture right here from the side view, the nose is gone, which is similar to the way they got rid of the nose in the Sphinx. A lot of Egyptian sculptures have the nose missing. Perhaps it's probably because they didn't want people to see the evidence of the wide nose, which is classic with people of African Negroid descent. So here we have, in this caption, it talks about Herodotus again, Greek historian. He judges and talks about the appearance of the Colchians. He says, "As for me, I judge the Colchians to be a colony of the Egyptians, because like them, they are black with woolly hair." And again, another Greek historian called Xenophon, philosopher lived during 500, 400 BC. He quoted this about the Egyptians, that the men of Egypt are mostly brown and black with a skinny, desiccated look. So during 500 BC, on the Elephantine Island, the Israelites had settled here in this island in the middle of the Nile River in South Egypt. Now, after the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians in 586 BC, a lot of the Israelites supposedly went to Egypt with Jeremiah, although some people believe the Israelites left much earlier by way of the 10 lost tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel, who were deported by the Assyrians in 722 BC. From Assyria to Babylon and then to Egypt along the Nile River, they landed on eventually Elephantine Island. Now, how do we know back then that the Egyptians and Moses were all in the same appearance? The Hebrew Israelites enslaved under the Egyptians were also in the same skin color as the Egyptians that they were enslaved by. Here in Exodus 2:15, it says that, "Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of the Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian." Midian is also associated with Cush. "And he sat down by a well. Now the priests of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they had came to Reuel their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, Because an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock." Now, the daughters that came home early, the father wanted to know why were they home so early in the day, and the father didn't know what had happened with Moses helping them. The daughters of Midian, who back in ancient times Midian was in the land of Cush or Ethiopia, or just Africa period. And so the Midianites, who were also black at that time, they described Moses as an Egyptian. Now, you remember the Egyptians were black with woolly hair back in those days, and if Moses was a Caucasian or European Jew, then he should have a clear distinction. You should be able to really clearly, distinctly tell who's an Egyptian and who's a Hebrew. Like today, we can tell who's a Jew in America and who's black. Now, the Elephantine Temple resembled the Shiloh Temple built by the 10 tribes in the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, the Israelites that dwelt on this island, they kept the holy days and followed the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, and not the Talmud, of which Judaism uses, which came out of Babylon, which, of course, Babylon means to confuse or to babble. The temple and the people of Elephantine Island were overtaken by the Egyptian rebels in 410 BC. Here's a picture of the island of Yeb, aka the Elephantine Island. It sits in the middle of the Nile River. Some more photos. This is a replica of the temple, the northern temple, Shiloh Temple. Here you can see the entryway in the front. And here we see a construction view model laid out of Elephantine Island with its temple right there. Previous picture we saw the entryway, which you can see with the two big walls and the door in the middle. Now, what about Libya? The Bible talks about Libya too. Cyrene, Libya, 125 AD. The Israelites escaped Roman persecution in Jerusalem after the Roman-Jewish war and fled to Libya. They established a Hebrew empire, but the Romans suppressed it and forced them further south into Africa. Now, Herodotus, again the Greek historian, writing about Libya in his stories, which is one of his collections of books, Book 4, stated as follows. One thing I can add about this country, so far as one knows, is that it is inhabited by 4 races, and 4 only, of which 2 are indigenous to the land and 2 are not. The indigenous peoples, meaning the peoples that have been there and since day one, are the Libyans and the Ethiopians. The former occupying the northerly, and the latter the more southerly parts. The immigrants are the Phoenicians and the Greeks. Now, in Acts 13:1, there's a verse that says, "Now they were in the church that was at Antioch." Antioch is in like modern-day Turkey, and certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger. They called Simeon Niger. Niger means black in Latin. And Lucius of Cyrene, Cyrene's in Libya, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. So in book 7 of Herodotus, the histories, Herodotus stated again that the eastern Ethiopians, for there were 2 sorts of Ethiopians in the army who served with the Indians. They were just like the southern Ethiopians, except for their language and hair, meaning talking about the Dravidian Indians in India. They were considered the eastern Ethiopians because they was on the east side of the Red Sea. They had the same skin color, but they had difference was the language and the hair. For their hair is straight, while that of the Ethiopians in Libya is the crispest and curliest in the world. So here we see that Herodotus is saying that the Ethiopians, or the people that were in Libya, had the crispiest and curliest hair in the world. Now we know that right now in Libya, a lot of the Arabs you see in Libya do not have curly, kinky hair like people of African Negroid descent. That's because back then the Libyans were black. Now, moving forward to Ghana, 300 AD, the Za dynasty. If you ask anybody that knows the history from Ghana, that is from Ghana, he'll know about the Za dynasty. 200 years after the exile of Hebrews out of Jerusalem, the Israelites went to Yemen and later migrated to Timbuktu in Africa, which is currently like in the area of Mali. Za el-Yemeni descended from these Hebrew Israelites and founded the old kingdom of Ghana in the Za dynasty, with Gao being the capital city on the Niger River in what is now Mali. The Za dynasty traced it to the lineage of Israelite kings from the 10 tribes of the kingdom of Israel. This is more evidence of Hebrews in Africa coming from Ghana. Here we have a picture of the old Ghana Empire back in early AD, 830 to 1235. As you can see, it's around the area of Mauritania, Mali, Senegal, Gambia, and here you see at the bottom what is modern day Ghana right now, which is right next to Togo, Benin, and Nigeria. As you can see, the Niger River right there at the bottom. So the Mali people today, are they related to the European Jews that we see today? By looking at these pictures, obviously they are not. And if they are, how did they go from black to white? How did they go from having kinky, curly hair, woolly hair, and dark skin to having straight hair, different color eyes, and white skin? How does that happen? And no, it's not from the lack of sunlight and vitamin D. So the Mali people, from Babylon to Timbuktu, how could the white European Jews survive in the deserts of Africa, Israel, or the Middle East, per the Bible, without melanin or sunscreen? Now, if the European Jews are truly from the ancient Israelites, they're truly descendants of the ancient Israelites, then they should have dwelt in Africa, in Egypt, and the Middle East for centuries. And how could they survive where the average temperature here in the desert is 90 to 100 degrees? It doesn't make any sense. See some pictures right here. People of the land. We have another map of the ancient Ghana Empire. The ancient Ghana Empire, again, ruled from 830 AD to 1235 AD. Was located, like I said, in what is now southeastern Mauritania, Senegal, and western Mali. Slavery is still present in Mauritania. Could it be that the Mauritanians living here and their forefathers are enduring still the curses of Israel as foretold in Deuteronomy 28? These are some of the places in Africa where the ancient Hebrew Israelites settled and lived hundreds of years ago. Mauritania, here's a close-up picture on the map next to Mali, right above Senegal. So, quote, they said about Mauritanian slavery, on this land, everybody's exploited. Talking about Mauritania, the vast Saharan nation didn't make slavery a crime until 2007. So in 2007, slavery was then made a crime in Mauritania, and only one slave owner since then has been successfully prosecuted. Now here's a picture of a lady from Mauritania. It's hard to pronounce her name. Is Mokir Mint Yarba. She escaped slavery in 2010, and she has asked the Mauritanian courts to prosecute her slave masters. I demand justice, she says, justice for her daughter that they killed, and justice for all the time they spent beating and abusing me. And this is a real person. I'm talking about the type of practices and abuse she went through, even in 2010. Slavery still going on, folks, in Africa. You see some more pictures of slaves that have been generations of slaves, and they've been enslaved so long under their masters that they don't know how to live without them. Even if the masters were to set them free, they would not know where to go and how to live without their masters. So Mauritania, some people still live in slave villages without their masters, but still they may be forced to work without pay, and the land usually is owned by the master, and the residents live in extreme poverty. So no matter if they don't live around their masters in eyesight, they still at times can be called upon to do work without pay, and they live extremely poor. Now, the Hebrews in Africa, going back to Ghana, according to the writings of Eldad the Danite, which is the reason why the European Jews believe that the Beta Israel Ethiopian Jews are from the tribe of Dan, they had a story about this guy in which, a famous Algerian Jewish author of the 9th century talked about a Hebrew nation in Ghana, and also in parts of Africa, Ethiopia, which followed the law of Moses. Now, the people of Ghana trace their roots to the Jews/Hebrews of the first diaspora in 600, 700 BC, who were forcibly expelled from Israel, led by the Syrians, like we talked about. In support of this guy named Eldad reported that the people of Ghana followed the Torah, law of Moses, which was compiled before the diaspora, and not the Talmud, which was compiled in Jerusalem and Babylon much later by the Pharisees and Sadducees during the early centuries of the Christian era. See some more pictures of the Songhai Empire, Ghana Empire, Mali Empire, and Kingdom of Gao, which are all empires of ancient Ghana. In 600 AD, some of the Ghana territory was captured by Muslims and led to the Saharan trade through Ghana. The Saharan trade made the area there rich, but by 1000 AD, the Israelite kings of Ghana had converted to Islam to make doing business with the Islamic traders easier. Mali became known as the Empire of Songhai in 1500 AD when Sani Ali conquered the area. And he was the last of the Israelite Za dynasty, which lasted 1,200 years until 1492. Here we have Algeria, 688 to 705 AD. Queen Dia Kahina of Numidia, which is in Algeria, was an Israelite who was against Islamic expansion at the time. She belonged to the Luwada tribe and lived in the Aris Mountains, which is in North Africa. She led a fight against the Islamic invaders who were trying to infiltrate her Israelite kingdom. Numidia, under the Roman Republic / Roman Empire, back in the day, this was a part of Africa north of the Sahara, the boundaries of which at times corresponded roughly with those living in modern-day Algeria. Now, its earliest inhabitants were divided into tribes and clans and were physically indistinguishable from the other Berber inhabitants of early North Africa. From the 6th century BC, certain points along the coast were occupied by the Carthaginians, hard to pronounce some of these names, who by the 3rd century BC had expanded into the interior as far as the Vesti. And Carthage is a city in North Africa. This right here, the map right here explains, as you can see, the Atlas Mountains, the Oris Mountains. North of the Oris Mountains is basically North Africa. Here we see Mauritania in yellow and green, and Numidia in yellow over here in modern-day Algeria. And as you can see, if you look at the bottom, you will see it says Ethiopians. And the word Ethiopians is kind of high up. It's kind of higher than what you would think Ethiopia is supposed to be at. That's because back in ancient times, Ethiopia consisted of the majority of Africa, excluding Libya and Egypt. Another map showing you North Africa, where Morocco, over there to the northwest side of Africa, Mauritania down below Morocco, Mali, Libya, Tunisia, and Niger. Now again, the original Berbers, the Tuaregs, were black in those days. In Iberia, which was known as back in those days, replacing the modern day Spain and Portugal, the Berbers were also known as the Moors, and they created a highly advanced civilization and culture famous for its art, architecture, and centers of learning. While having rule over Spain, the Berbers, who themselves 50 years earlier had been forced to accept Islam, now sometimes force the inhabitants of Iberia to do the same. Though the number of original Moors remained small, many native Iberian inhabitants converted to Islam. Now, according to Greek and Roman eyewitnesses, the indigenous people of Carthage, which is in Tunisia, North Africa, were peoples called the Afars, or the Afars. Now, the Afar were a Negroid race by all accounts. Virgil, in his Moratum, speaks of a woman from Afar, or the Afar race. Now, he says of her, quote in his writings, that of the Afar race, or Afar race, her whole figure bears proof of her country. Her color, very dark, her lips thick, her hair tightly curled. Now, this is quoted by the poet, Roman poet, Publius Vergilius. A lot of these names are, again, hard to pronounce. You have to excuse me for that. But he lived in 70 to 19 BC, a long time ago. Long time ago, he even himself wrote how the people indigenous of the land of modern-day Tunisia, the Afars, were black in appearance, and they were Negroid by all accounts. To be noted, Virgil, which is an easier way to pronounce his name, described this lady's whole figure as proof of her country. Now, what was her country? It was Carthage. Carthage, Tunisia. The Afar peoples dwelt in around this area. Of course, Tunisia is a North African country, again, between Algeria to the left and Libya to the right. Virgil was stating that the Afar people, like this woman, were typically very dark with thick lips and tight curled woolly hair. This is just like a Negro and not an Arab. Back then, the Arabs weren't even around. Islam had not even been created in BC. This is further proof that in those days of Jesus Christ, the Jews that dwelt in Cyrene, Libya, the Apostle Mark, and Lucius of Cyrene, Libya, would have been black as well. Afar people, today of Africa, the Afar, also known as the Nakil, are an ethnic group in the Horn of Africa. There's a lot of migration and a lot of expansion of territory and just settling different lands that happened in Africa for centuries. Now, they primarily live in the Afar region of Ethiopia and in northern Djibouti, although some also inhabit the southern point of Eritrea. The Afar speak the Afar language, which is part of the Cushitic branch of the Afro-Asiatic family. As you can see here, the Afar people of Africa are black. Just like Virgil states in his writings in early BC. Some more pictures of the Afar people. As you can see, they are just as similar to black people in America and black people in South America and all over the world. See some more pictures, different hairstyles, different clothing, but still, nevertheless, they still are black in appearance. Again, we're still talking about the Berbers. Terentius Afer was a person. He was a slave. Well, he was born in Carthage and was an Afar, and he was described as being handsome and very dark, according to Suetonius. Now, we're gonna call his name Terence for short for Titus. He was brought from North Africa to Rome as a slave by Terentius Lucanus, who was a Roman senator. He was then freed and named Terence after his patron, and Afer after his presumed place of birth and heritage. Now, the Greeks, Philadelphus II was the king of the. He was the king of the Ptolemaic Egypt in 283 BC to 246 BC. He described the Garamantes, who were people in that area of Tunisia, as being moderately black in color. Another people to inhabit Punic Africa were the Garamantes, and the Garamantes were a Negro race of people. Frumentinus, who was also a Greek, born in Tyre, Lebanon, lived in 38 AD. He was an Ethiopian, but was the first. He was the first bishop of Axum, Ethiopia, and he is credited with bringing Christianity to the Axumite kingdom. He describes fighting a contingent of Carthaginian auxiliary fighters, from whom were all very black in skin color. Diodorus, in his written works, mentions a Greek lieutenant named Agathocles, who overcomes the people in present-day Tunisia, who were the same hue as the Ethiopians. So here we have multiple accounts from different historians, Greek and Roman, that all describe the people of Northern Africa to be people of color. Here we see pictures, multiple Arabs today in that area of North Africa. And as you see, the majority of them have straight hair, dark eye colors, and white skin. Even though they're living in lands where it's 90 to 100 degrees and the sun is constantly beating down on their faces. Now, when you have melanin in your skin, in your DNA, then the melanin makes you dark when the sun hits you. Back in ancient days, North Africa, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, the people in these areas were all black in appearance, like the people right here. who are still living in North Africa. So the original Berbers in North Africa were a people of color, just like the other inhabitants of Africa, the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, and neighboring Canaanites. If you ask any body from North Africa, whether it's from Libya or Algeria or Morocco, and most notably, they're probably going to be Arabic or Arab, ask them who were the original Berbers and see what they tell you. Some more pictures, the original Berbers on camels. Now let's talk about Senegal. Tordurma, 1402 AD, near the Niger River in eastern Senegal, near the border with Mali, lives a community of Hebrews known as Bani Israel. In the 1850s, near the Niger River, there was documented history of 7 princes descending from kings of the ancient Israelites. The residents, now all Muslims, are a member of a tribe whose name means sons of Israel. So to not make things unclear, the residents of the land that they're in now are primarily all Muslims, but the members of this tribe, the name of the tribe means sons of Israel, and they trace their lineage to 2 clans, Silla and Drame, and they say they are descendants from the Egyptian Jews, and that their people came from Egypt to Somalia, and from there to Nigeria, where they split about 1,000 years ago. One branch of the 2 families went to Mali, another to Guinea, and the rest in eastern Senegal. And here we have a picture of them right here, Bani Israel, Senegal. Let's talk about Uganda. The Abe-Yudea people of Uganda means the people of Judah. And they trace their lineage to King David, and they state that all their people migrated from Israel into Africa, later crossing over the Nile River and settling in Uganda. Seme Kakungu in 1917 founded the Lagundan Jewish community, even though many denied his followers Israelite ancestry. The British later forced his followers to convert to Judaism in the 1920s and also take vaccinations, which they had previously rejected. Now here we see a common theme where a lot of these African tribes in different areas of Africa are saying that they trace their lineage to when the Israelites left either Egypt or Israel, and they migrated further south into the heart of Africa. And back in those days, they didn't know about Judaism and the Kabbalah and the Talmud, but of course later, when the Europeans arrived, they would force them into Judaism conversion, because that's what the Jews of today, they practice Judaism. This is the reason why they're called Jews, and they're not called Hebrew Israelites, like it was back in the ancient times. Now, again, talking about Ghana and the Ivory Coast, the Ashanti tribe of Ghana traced their lineage to Judah, one of the 12 tribes from which their people lived in the city of Ashan. Now, Ashan was one of the cities that was laid out to the tribe of Judah, the people of Judah, and Ashanti means people of Ashan, or people of the smoke city. The southern Israel city of Ashan was destroyed when the Romans invaded Jerusalem in 70 AD. In Joshua 15:41-42, here we have the verse where it talks about the city of Ashan, and it says, "And Gederoth, Beth Dagon, and Namath, and Makeda, 16 cities with their villages, Libnah and Ether and Ashan." The Ashanti men, they blow the shofar, the ram's horn that talks about in the Bible in Joshua, which used to announce festivals or celebrations, or when they were ready to go to war. This is Hebrew tradition that they're doing in Africa. They didn't come up with this out of thin air, out of a hat. They've been doing this for a long time because it's been passed down to them from their ancient Israelite past heritage. Here we see another picture of the shofar horn. Again, a shofar is a horn, a trumpet, which is made from a ram's horn and was used in ancient Israel to announce the gathering of the people for different events such as war. And so in Joshua 6:45, and the 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 shofars of ram's horn, and the 7th day you shall compass the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow with the shofars. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the shofar, all the people shall shout with a great shout. It was used back then and still used today. Jews today also use the shofar. Here we see 1881, the Ashanti ambassador with Europeans on a makeshift boat raft. And as you see, the Ashanti ambassador, he's the priest, the leader. He's the one with the head cover on his head, and he has the breastplate of judgment necklace around his neck. Isn't that interesting? So the Ashanti ambassador of the 1800s, why would an African wear the Hebrew breastplate of judgment that he has each of the 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel, unless the Hebrews back then were black to begin with? We all know that a white couple cannot have a black child. So if the Hebrews started out as white Europeans, then they could not ever be black, because we all know that Europeans or a Caucasian race cannot have an African child simply by continuous mating with their same race, and nor can they get darker in the sun to explain that they went from black to white or white to black. Got to start somewhere, and the ancient Hebrew Israelites started off black. Here we see a picture of the breastplate of judgment, and here it describes the different color of the stones laid out in 4 rows, 3 in each row, and how the ancient priests of the Cohenite tribe, which is the descendants of Aaron, used to wear their garments in the temple. So does race or skin color matter? A lot of people say, well, why does it matter what color Jesus was? Why does it matter what color the Hebrew Israelites were? Why are you making such a big deal? But if it didn't matter, then why would they hide the truth about the Hebrews back then being black? How come they're keeping that hidden, swept under the rug for nobody to really know unless you do your research? And so again, and the Bible talks about this breastplate of judgment. And it says here in Exodus 28, and thou shalt set in its settings of stones, even 4 rows of stones, and the stones shall be with the names of the children of Israel, 12 according to their names, like the engravings of a signet. Every one with his name shall they be according to the 12 tribes. The Ethiopians. Let's move on to the Ethiopians. The Hebrewisms of Ethiopia. The Falasha, which means stranger, of Ethiopia, the Beta Israel camp. They were discovered by the Europeans in 1848 with a population of 45,000. Now, I was watching one video, and it was explaining how one of the European Jews had found out about the Falasha Beta Israel camp, and how they claimed to be descendants of the ancient Hebrew Israelites, and he wanted to meet them. So he arranged where he could go down there and meet them in Ethiopia. And so the leader of the Ethiopian tribe, he was all set to meet this another Jew or Hebrew Israelite, as he probably thought he was meeting. And when the European Jew got down there and got to the village, all the people were anxiously awaiting to see somebody else that supposedly was a Hebrew Israelite or Jew. And when they saw the European Jew with his people, they were all amazed. And the European Jew said, I'm here. I'm the guy you talk to. I'm a Jew. And he talked about Judaism, and he said that he told him about his heritage of being Jewish, and the people of the Beta Israel camp were all talking amongst themselves in their language, and they were looking very confused. And the guy said, well, what's going on? Why is everybody looking at me strange, and why are they talking, and why are they, this is like something is going on, like they look like they've seen a stranger. And so the guy said, well, we've never known in our history and what's been passed down to us for many generations of our forefathers, we've never known the Hebrew Israelites to be white. And the European Jew guy, he said, well, yeah, there's also some white Jews too, and we're from the north. And they were totally amazed and shocked because they had never heard and they never had anything passed down to them from their forefathers that the Hebrew Israelites were white. So the 45,000 Philosophists from Ethiopia were considered to be from the tribe of Dan by the Israeli board. Most likely, most of them were told they were from the tribe of Dan. However, there are also accounts that they were told they were from the tribe of Judah, Naphtali, Simeon, and Benjamin. Now, they all followed the Torah and the laws as it was given to Moses by God and put in the Torah. The Philosophy means strangers, as I said before, strange enough that they were allowed to come to Israel under the notion that they were from the tribe of Dan. So, they were only allowed to come to Israel unless they were known to be from the tribe of Dan, not Judah or Levi, which we have clear proof in the Bible with Moses and his Ethiopian wife Zipporah and King Solomon and Queen Sheba of Ethiopia, the Queen of Ethiopia, Queen Makeda. Where's the Ark of the Covenant now when we talk about the Hebrews? Well, the majority of Jews are Europeans and Sephardic Jews, then shouldn't the Ark of the Covenant be dwelling in Israel right now? Shouldn't it be dwelling with the European Jews? That's not what most scholars think. Most scholars attest that they believe that the Ark of the Covenant, which they were looking for in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, also known as the Ark of Testimony, is in Ethiopia. Now, this is a chest that's described in the book of Exodus as containing the tablets of stone, which the Ten Commandments is written on. And also some traditional interpretations say that the book of Exodus, the book of Numbers, and the letter to the Hebrews are also in the ark, as well as Aaron's rod, a jar of manna, the manna that came from heaven, and the first Torah scroll as written by Moses. However, the first book of Kings says that at the time of King Solomon, the ark contained only 2 tablets of the law. According to the book of Exodus, the ark was built at the command of God in accordance with the instructions given to Moses on Mount Sinai. God was said to have communicated with Moses from between 2 cherubim on the ark's cover. This is Axum, Ethiopia, where in the little circle where the Ark of the Covenant is supposed to be at right now. Some researchers, many researchers believe, especially British writer Graham Hancock, that they believe that the Ark of the Covenant is resting in a church in the Ethiopian city of Axum. Here's a close-up picture of the temple, the church, where it's supposed to be located at. Here's just a kind of like a replica of the Ark of the Covenant. Of course, it's not the real Ark of the Covenant. As you can see, the holes where you slide the bars in to hold it up and carry it, and the cherubim, the 2 angels with their wings touching. Here we have pictures of the Beta Israel group from Ethiopia. A lot of books written about them. They were brought to Israel in 1984, flown in jumbo jet planes. They gutted out the plane, took all the seats out, and they packed as many Ethiopian Jews into the plane. They weren't even fastened by seatbelts. They all just got on the plane, and under Operation Moses and Operation Solomon, which happened between 1984 and 1991, they were taken to Israel. This was a big thing for them because they always wanted to come back to the Holy Land. These are some more Ethiopian Jews. As you can see, different variations of skin color, even in Ethiopia, just like African Americans today in America. More pictures of the Ethiopian Jews with the Star of David behind them, which wasn't probably what they were using back in the day, but they use it now. So here we have a quote from a rabbi, and he said here, I myself saw two of them in southern Egypt, and he was talking about, of course, black Hebrews, Jews, and he says here they are dark-skinned, and one could not tell whether they kept the teachings of the Karaite or of the rabbis. For some of their practices resemble the Karaite teaching, but in other things they appear to follow the instruction of the rabbis. And they say they are related to the tribe of Dan. This is from Rabbi Obadiah, year of Bertinoro in 1488. So back then, 1488, these group of Africans from Ethiopia were saying that they were from the tribe of Dan. Amongst we knowing that they also should have some descendants from the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Levi. Now, moving forward out of the Hebrewisms of Africa and the traditions that they keep, in Deuteronomy 28:48, one of the curses is, "Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck, until he have destroyed thee." Now, what race of people were enslaved in nakedness, without clothes, shoes, or jackets, and in hunger, in thirst, and with a literal yoke of iron around their neck? Was it the European Jews during the Holocaust of 12 years, or was it African Hebrew Israelites that were taken from Africa into many nations miles away as slaves? Literally, Africans, the descendants of Africa, the Hebrew Israelites living in Africa, when they were taken as slaves, they had yokes of irons around their neck. Here we see pictures. Yokes of iron around the neck with chains. In nakedness and in thirst. Iron collars, just like what the Bible talks about. Here we have roots. Now, Deuteronomy 28:49, verse 49 to 50, "The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young." Now, the white man, the Europeans, has always been involved in the conquering and colonizing many nations, such as the Americas, Africa, British India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Australia, the Philippines, and the West, East, Lesser Indies, Virgin Islands. They continued the enslavement of the peoples of these lands into whatever country they decided to bring them to. It didn't matter if the slaves were 11, 30, or 83. You were still able to be enslaved and used. This is also why there are descendants of Indian slaves living in South Africa, Jamaica, South America, and so on. And this is why we speak different languages, but all have roots connected to Africa. Speak different languages like Dutch and Portuguese and Spanish and French, Arabic, all except Hebrew. Back in those days, we probably spoke Hebrew, but now you see many people of color in different nations that are speaking different languages, like Dutch, which is, we know that is not our ancient language, and Spanish and Portuguese and French or Arabic. And as you can see here with the partition of Africa in 1885 to 1914, you can see the colonial powers of Africa. Here we have French West Africa, and we have the British and the Spanish and German, and the Germans and the Portuguese and the Italians. And here we have Ethiopia was independent for a long time. And then we see here we have French Somaliland, British Somaliland, and Italian Somaliland. And we see how the Italians also colonized Eritrea. And this is partly why we see different skin tones and hair textures with the people of Somalia and Eritrea. So you may see a Somalian that is really, really dark, just as dark as African Americans, but they have straight hair. Same thing with people from Eritrea. They may have dark skin, brown skin, just like African Americans, but they have different grains of hair. So Deuteronomy 28:50, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Here we see a sign that says unattended children will be sold into slavery. Here we see another sign that says a great sale of slaves. And this is in 1855, January 10th. It talks about 3 bucks aged from 20 to 26, strong, able-bodied. 1 wench, Sally, age 42, excellent cook. Another wench, Liz, age 23, with a 6-month-old pickaninny. Now, it's a shame because, they didn't care what age you were, and they just labeled you anything they wanted to label you, which is the same thing as a byword, as the Bible talks about. And it didn't matter if you had a 6-month-old child, a 1-year-old child, 2-year-old child, you were still as good to be sold into slavery. 1 buck, age 52, a good kennel man, and 17 bucks, age from 12 to 20, excellent. And this is really what happened in the 1800s. And this is, of course, the media likes to continue to show us these things with our 2 slave movies we get every year. Here we see young children enslaved behind a fence, just like Bible prophecy. A sale of Negroes, public sale of Negroes, they often did, and during the daytime, different types of advertisement. Like right here, it says, a valuable Negro woman accustomed to all kinds of housework. She's a good plain cook, excellent dairy maid, washes and irons. She has 4 children, one a girl about 13 years of age, another 7, a boy about 5 years old, and an infant 11 months old. 2 of the children will be sold with the mother, the others separately, if it best suits the purchaser. Here we have another slave, a very valuable blacksmith. He was good at. He has a wife and daughter. The smith is in the prime of his life and a perfect master at his trade. His wife is about 27 years old, and his daughter, 12 and 10 years old, have been brought up as house servants, and as such are very valuable. Also for sale, 2 likely young Negro wenches, one of whom is 16 and the other 13, both of whom have been taught and accustomed to the duties of house service. The 16-year-old wench has 1 eye. You wonder why she has 1 eye? It's probably because of the slave masters. Then we have it says a likely yellow girl, about 17 to 18 years old, has been accustomed to all kinds of house and garden work. She is sold for no fault, sold as sound as $1. Now she's probably yellow because the slave masters were raping her parents, her mother or her grandmother. Somewhere down the line, it was some raping going on by the slave masters. So here we see another sign here where it says, caution, colored people of Boston, one and all, you are hereby respectfully cautioned and advised to avoid conversing with the watchmen and police officers of Boston. For since the recent order of the mayor and aldermen, they are empowered to act as kidnappers and slave catchers. This goes back to Bible prophecy. Here we see pictures of slave auctions auctioning off little babies, and the mother is pleading not to separate her children. Slaves being sold at a public auction on the blocks. This is all in the Bible, folks. Deuteronomy 28:59. Then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, even great plagues, and of long continuance, and sore sicknesses, and of long continuance. Moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, which thou wast afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee. Also every sickness and every plague, which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. Deuteronomy 28:51. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or the flocks of the sheep, until thou have destroyed thee. So does this sound like what has happened to blacks in American Africa, or does this sound like what happened to the Jews in Europe, or the Jews that's currently in Israel, and their descendants, who has been having everything taken from them for centuries, from lives being lost, livestock, resources of the land. The land that the Israelites were scattered to, Africa, has been stripped of its resources by other nations. Now, primarily, a lot of the Hebrew Israelites went into Africa, and so that was their land for a long time, because they were exiled out of Israel, and a lot of them migrated out of Israel into Africa to escape persecution and captivity. But in Israel, there's no resources anymore for anybody to steal. Even the water in modern-day Israel is imported from somewhere else, and they're currently looking at ways to use salination to get fresh drinking water and water for sanitation, because the water from the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River is running out. It's being tapped. So also other thing to make note is that if a country has no resources, then how does that country make money? Of course, the money has to come from all of the European Jews that are scattered in America and all over the world, and our tax dollars, parts of our tax dollars that we paid the IRS and food tax or Jewish food taxes that is hidden that we don't know about. A lot of that money goes towards Jewish organizations, which then gets funneled back to Israel. And a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't know about the hidden Jewish food tax that all has certain labels corresponding to the Jewish organizations that the money that is going towards these organizations are getting. And you can easily look this up on the internet and see the symbols on your food at the grocery store and what Jewish organization they're linked to that's getting the money every time you purchase food at the grocery store. So moving forward, Deuteronomy 28:52, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest throughout all thy land. He shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. In Africa, the Hebrew Israelites possessed the land, but were invaded and occupied by different nations of people, like the British in South Africa, the Italians under Mussolini in Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa, and the Arabs who took over North Africa and parts of Israel, and many more. Even in America, the Greenwood District, aka Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was taken from us while we were minding our own business, trying to be independent, make our own money, and create our own system. This again shows the division of Africa by the many different European powers. Notice that all of these countries that are partitioned of Africa, they're all from Europe. Every last one of them. Here we begin, like I was talking about Black Wall Street. The most important thing that we can do now is what they did back then and during Black Wall Street era, is support black businesses. Black Wall Street Memorial, 1921. Supposedly the whole Tulsa race riot and destruction of Black Wall Street all happened by a rape white girl myth. That somebody had raped a white girl, touched a white girl, and that set everything off. And the Negro business section in Tulsa, Oklahoma was laid to waste by the torches and by airplanes. The men of Black Wall Street, here we see pictures in the early 1900s. And as I said before, they were doing it big. Tons of businesses, churches, restaurants, you name it, they created the system. The system that worked then, which could still work today, but there's a lot of powers against us that is keeping us suppressed so that this never happens again. So it just goes to show you that we come from excellence, and to excellence we shall return if we only believe. Now, like I was talking about earlier, in the city of Durban, South Africa, you see that the South Africans were taken over by the British. And we all know the movie Mandela, and we all know about the apartheid. And here we see whites and Africans fighting, just like in America, for their freedom. They were given passes. They couldn't go anywhere without a pass. With a pass, the people of South Africa felt like slaves, and they shouldn't have to have passes of identification and be subject to searches and stuff in their own country, their own land, when they are the indigenous natives of the land. And this is the whole reason why they wanted to get rid of, bury the apartheid. Here we see the men of Ethiopia, soldiers ready for war, when the Italians came and wanted to colonize and take over Ethiopia, set up shop. Now, Emperor Haile Selassie, he announced this back in 1935. And they came from all points. They came from the north, they came from the south with airplanes and troops. And Mussolini, the Italian, was a friend of Hitler. They were all European. But they were able to ward them off with help from outside countries. And the Ethiopian army, they didn't give up. Here you see a picture of Mussolini and his Italian army right there in the background. Moving forward, Deuteronomy 28:54 says, "So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil towards his brother, and towards the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children which he shall leave." Now, Tupac said in one of his songs, and Changes, that when we were kids, we played like brothers. But when we get older, that all changes. We see our once brother, and we went to school with in elementary school and played in the streets, we see him as an enemy. We see him as a threat, and we're quick to kill our own brother. When we played, like I said, when we played in the streets, in the school, everybody, were like brothers and sisters. Nobody had any ill intentions towards each other then. But like I said, when a lot of times when we get older and you get caught up in gangs and territorial fighting, then this all goes out the window, and you're in the gangs, you're fighting over your neighborhood, your territory, and you are stuck in situations where the situations are not favorable. There's a lack of employment, lack of education, lack of basic services, broken family. I mean, you name it. It all contributes to black-on-black crime, which is destroying African American communities all across America. This is just another way they make us not trust one another, even if it means doing business with close family and friends. Here we see pictures of two young boys, brothers. And as we can see here in the movie Menace to Society, black man, black-on-black crime, and sometimes lives are taken. And Deuteronomy 28:54 talks about this. It says, "So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil towards his brother." Now the KKK, trying to be, I guess, educate and be funny at the same time, they got a poster saying the KKK killed 3,446 blacks in 86 years. But black-on-black murders surpass this number every 6 months. And these are true facts, folks. We're killing each other more than KKK has killed blacks in over 86 years. And they have cartoons that make mockery of it. As we can see here. Now, again, with that same verse about the remnant of the children being left by the man, 6% of black children are being raised in single-parent households, and this equates to young black boys being raised without a father and young black girls being raised without a father as well. This as a whole negatively affects the child whether society wants to believe it or not. This also adds to the struggles that blacks, especially black males, face in America. Now, the Friends of the Court is dismantling the black family while parents fight over child support, parenting time violations, from not being able to see your child, or simply trying to make the other parent look bad in order to get full custody. Often this fighting hurts the child in the long run and leaves the other parent, most often the father, with nothing more than the feeling of being worthless and not needed in their child's life. This sometimes and a lot of times can lead to resentment towards a child that is already affected by his or her broken family. And, while the Friends of the Court system, they try to make things as close to the family unit as possible, but in the same essence, if the man is not paying his child support, or he doesn't have the means or the money to pay his child support, then there's even more harsher penalties that are now placed on the black man, such as putting a boot on your car, suspending your license, not enabling you to get a passport, a warrant out for your arrest. I mean, there's a whole slew of things, and all of these things further prevent the black man from getting the money to pay the child support, because you can't obviously pay child support if you can't drive, if you don't have a valid license, or if you got a warrant out for your arrest, because if you're in jail, obviously you can't pay your child support. And that just further breaks down the family so that the child doesn't have a father. This was going on today, every day in the Friends of the Court. You go to any Friends of the Court, you will see white men, but you will see a lot of African American men as well. But you have to remember that the family unit for African Americans is different. It's different than the family unit for whites and Asians and Indians and Jews. A lot of times in their culture they teach that you go to school, you get a job, you get married. A lot of times both people are working, both in good fields that they were told by their parents to get into, like engineering or law or medical, business. And so they are taught to get married, have kids, and their kids have kids, and they stay married. But the divorce rates for African Americans is higher than any other race. And we see more broken families, children without fathers, than any other race in America. Here we see fathers right here trying to be, black fathers trying to be, good fathers to their children, which is what we all want. That's not what society wants. That's not what the agenda wants. But in the Bible, Deuteronomy 28:54, it says here again, his eye shall be evil towards his brother and towards the wife of his bosom, and towards the remnant of his children which he shall leave. And there's a lot of frustration and anger and domestic violence going on in the black family. A lot of times we see this portrayed over and over again in Tyler Perry movies. A lot of his movies, it's always some turmoil, or the black relationships are gone haywire. And it makes you wonder, why are we always constantly being shown movies where the relationships are never stable? Somebody's crazy, somebody's gay, somebody's alcoholic, a drug addict, somebody's, it's just all types of confusion going on. And this is not good, because we tend to emulate what you see. You tend to believe what you see on TV and the big movie screens. Again, towards the remnant of his children which he shall leave, which is going on today in African American families. Women are raising boys and girls, and the father is nowhere to be found. In 2012, 67% of black families are single-parent families, compared to 42% for Latinos, 25% for whites, and 17% for Asians. So as you can see here in this little cartoon, it says, "What about him?" And the mom probably says, "What about him?" Whether or not she needs a child support or not, a father's time is not important, it seems like nowadays. But as we know, spending time with children is, as in this picture right here, is more important than spending money on children. Moving forward, Deuteronomy 28:59, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, and even the great plagues, like we said before, and of long continuance, and sore sickness, and of long continuance. So all these diseases of Egypt, and even other diseases, are going to be plagued upon the people of Israel and the descendants forever. Now, what's curses of Israel? What we got going on in America and worldwide in African American population? Hypertension, diabetes, stroke, peripheral vascular disease, end-stage renal disease, sickle cell anemia, cancer, HIV. And as you can see here, the good doctor is taking blood pressure. African Americans who are prone to hypertension, also peripheral vascular disease, and there's complications of leg sores and ulcers and wounds that won't heal, and later amputations. And as you can see here, African American woman checking her sugars because she's diabetic, and the complications behind being diabetic, of course, is hypertension, peripheral vascular disease, and end-stage renal disease, where you see this man right here on the dialysis machine getting dialysis, and this is running rampant in Detroit, Michigan, in African Americans. Here we have in Africa some more sort of plagues, the Ebola virus, which has caused a lot of death in 2007 in Uganda, and we even saw a recent outbreak in 2014 in Africa as well, with Ebola coming back. So pictures here. Ebola is also known as a hemorrhagic fever caused by fruit bats. Deuteronomy 28, 62-63, and ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven for multitude. So right here it's talking about how back in the day you were as numerous as the stars, but you're going to be left few in number. Because thou would not obey the voice of the Lord thy God, and it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. Here we have a chart right here, and it talks about the population of African Americans in the United States by list of year. And as you can see here, in 1790, African Americans made up almost 20% of the population of America in 1790, folks. Now, if we go down to 1870, right around the time when slavery was ended, the population of African Americans in America was 12.7%. So back then in 1870s, we were 12.7% of the population. 1880, 13.1% of the population. Now guess what? We're going to move forward over 100 years. Over 100 years down to 2010. You see here on this chart that we are only 12.6% of the population. Now, I don't know about you, but if we were 12.7% of the population in 1870, and well over 100 years has went by, and we're still 12.6% of the population of America, what is going on? I mean, Latinos are 20% of the population of America. They surpassed African Americans like around 2000, and they've never looked back. And you got to remember, America initially was, you had the native Indians, and you had the blacks that were here, as told by different historians and researchers, and then you have the slaves that are brought here to the America. So how is it that African Americans are still only 12% of the population in over 100 and something years? Well, the Negro Project, that's what's going on. The Negro Project, negative eugenics, all designed to depopulate African Americans because they couldn't just kill African Americans anymore because that's not legal. So they had to do it by other means that we will kill ourselves. So they believed back in those days black people were genetically inferior, and that black people needed birth control. Now the Negro Project, in essence, is to exterminate blacks. Now the aim of the program was to restrict and exterminate the black population under the pretense of better health and family planning. Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of this project, cleverly implemented her plan. Some within the black elite saw birth control as a means to attain economic empowerment, elevate the race, and gain respect of the whites. However, that's not the case. In reality, the forced sterilization that was going on back in those days, the abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics that were put all in the inner cities where black people were at, and never hardly in the suburbs where the white people were at. Birth control pills were all designed by whites to eliminate blacks and thus keep them from becoming significant in numbers in America. The morning after pill is over the counter now. So that means that if it's in your local CVS or Rite Aid in areas where it's predominantly African American, then now African American women can easily go get Plan B and abort their baby. In addition to the multiple abortion clinics that are all spread out throughout inner cities where African Americans dwell, you have black on black crime. You have the feminization, homosexual turn. It's a lot of black males are becoming homosexual and feminized so that they, of course, do not want to have children. They may adopt children, but they're not going to have their own seed. And of course, when you're locked up in prison for 30 years, you're not having any sex with a woman. You're not getting anybody pregnant. So these are all ways to depopulate African Americans, as well as the unfavorable lifestyles that we're living when you're in poverty, with eating processed foods and fast foods and foods high in fat and cholesterol and constant stress. Deuteronomy 28:64, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth unto the other, and thou shalt serve other gods which neither thou nor thy father have known, even wood and stone. Now, black people have been spread across the entire world as slaves to be forced to do the slave servitude labor for the rest of the world. If all blacks were to disappear from the world, who would do all the servitude jobs of America? What sports would not have any business? What sports would just say we had to shut down? What would the South look like? Now, also thing to note is if all African Americans all of a sudden just decided to move to one state in America, say Atlanta, Georgia, then that would make a lot of other races lose money. And if all the black folks in Detroit just left and went to Atlanta, then you would have a lot of Koreans that would not be making no money. A lot of Arabs would not be making no money. A lot of Jews would not be making no money. A lot of Indians won't be making any money. So it'd be a snowball effect. Because when the immigrants come over to America, it's like they're guaranteed a business, and they're guaranteed black people to buy from your business and black people to work for you. So you come over here to America, you get a business, and you get black people to work for you, and you get black people to buy from you. And that's the key to success for a lot of immigrants out in America. Sad but true. Now, we also worship the religions of our oppressors in the many nations we were used as slaves, and we now even worship the material things that they entice us with in the media and Hollywood and entertainment. So Deuteronomy 28:65, and among these nations shall thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of the eyes and sorrow of mind. Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of blacks feel trapped in a system where it is hard to succeed and even harder to follow your dreams. The morale right now of millions of blacks is low in America. The morale of Americans is low in America because of the economy. Some blacks even have lost the hope, has lost hope, and others don't dream anymore. It's like people are losing hope in anything getting better because things seem like they're getting worse. Food prices are going up, gas prices are going up. There's no focus on education. Schools are being shut down. You see black millionaires and black billionaires making tons of money hand over fist. except for it's not doing the black people as a whole any good. Our black dollars are being recycled and bouncing off other people's hands instead of black hands. And blacks don't support black businesses, and there really is no black businesses. Now, we all know education is the key to success, and without money, to pay for education, it's very hard to succeed. And student loans are one of the biggest loan sharks in America. It's enslaving people into a massive amount of student loan debt, often with no job after they get a degree. And with the ending of affirmative action, that's another whammy that's going to further hold blacks. So right now, material things seem to be our priority, and that's thanks to TV and everything else going on around us. And our kids are growing up in the same system that our past generations have had to endure and fight in, except for things are getting harder, and home teaching is not the same as it was years ago. Generations of kids are raising kids themselves. So not everyone is fortunate enough to make it out of the system or their negative environment to make millions of dollars and give back to a dying community. This constant struggle can easily make people lose hope, just like in Deuteronomy 28:65. So let's talk about some of the things that have ensured success of other races, but not the success of African Americans. Or are we always getting the short end of the stick? We're not getting our fair share. Let's look at the history of reparations payment. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but in 1990, USA gave Japanese Americans $1.6 billion in reparations, or that equates to about $20,000 each to each person. 1990, Austria gave Jews $25 million to Holocaust survivors. In 1988, Canada gave 250,000 miles of land to the Indians and Eskimos. 1988, Canada gave $230 million to Japanese Canadians. 1986, USA gave $32 million from an 1839 treaty to the Ottawas of Michigan. In 1985, USA gave $31 million to the Chippewas of Wisconsin. In the same year, they also gave $12.3 million to the Seminoles of Florida. In the same year, they gave $105 million to the Sioux tribe of South Dakota. And in 1980, they gave $81 million to the Clematis of Oregon. In 1971, they gave $1 billion plus 44 million acres of land to Alaskan Natives land settlement deal. In 1952, Germany gave $822 million to European Holocaust survivors. 1865, I mean, even farther back, going way back before 1865, but 1865 to present, USA gave $0 to African American black descendants for slavery and Jim Crow. 300 AD, or you might say 600 AD to present, Arab nations gave $0 to Africans and black descendants for the Arab slave trade, which lasted for over a millennia. Is something wrong with this picture, folks? Why are blacks not getting reparations? Why are we not getting anything? It's not just me. A lot of people are thinking the same thing, that why are we going through all of this? And as I talked about earlier, with our education, we're not going anywhere. So, again, the Bible talks about this. The Bible talks about this. In Deuteronomy 28:66, we read the Bible all the time, but we don't see the hidden clues. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shalt have no assurance of thy life. So it says here, Deuteronomy 28, that the Hebrew Israelites' life shall hang in doubt before thee, and they shall fear day and night, and shall have no assurance of thy life. Now, blacks living amongst each other have developed a distrust complex that is not present with the white man. Blacks are subject to getting robbed in broad daylight and at night by their own people instead of someone of another race. We see this going on all the time in Detroit, where other races jog and walk down the street, or they have nice vehicles parked outside their businesses, but yet blacks are getting robbed, carjacked, killed by the thousands in cities all across America. Therefore, because of this, going out in the streets in the daytime or in the nighttime can be a struggle with fear as the main stronghold. So if you've already been subject to being robbed at gunpoint in broad daylight with a sawed-off shotgun or just a regular handgun, you know, whether it's daytime or nighttime, you're going to have fear going out at night, and maybe even fear stopping at gas stations or wherever. Now, the same fear, whether you like it or not, prevents us from rising up and making a stand united as one to make a change to the system that has failed us. Fear is one of the reasons why we see a lot of things going on that are unfair and unjust to blacks, but we don't do anything. We don't stand up anymore. That was back in the days of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and the ancient black pioneers. Now we are fearful. So the system that's been designed a long time ago is designed for us not to succeed in it. But the thing is, if we have power, we have power in numbers. Even though our numbers are limited in America, we still have powers in numbers if we are united in voice and direction. Like I said, this is why we are. But the thing is, we're too scared to boycott businesses that are obviously not black-owned. We're too scared to make a stand. But at some point, we must demand for fair practices for our people, because nobody else is going to look out for the betterment of African Americans except for ourselves. This is why we must be able to depend on one another in order to survive. That means we have to trust one another. The trusting is all a part of having unity. Bob Marley always talked about unity, and after he died, his sons went to Africa. And while they were in South Africa, different parts of Africa, they looked around at everything that was going on with Africa and the culture and the dancing and saw and envisioned a strong, powerful Africa only if it could be unified. You know, only if Africa could be unified would it be a strong nation. But that's not always the case. So this being able to depend on each other to survive is literally going to be the difference between life or death in the long run if people do not take heed to the warning signs and wake up. Because things are getting a lot worse, and that's only going to make situations very, very bad for black people. And nobody's going to come to our rescue. It's not going to be Barack Obama. It's not going to be Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or any of the entertainers in Hollywood or sports players. They're not going to come to the plate to help up. So Malcolm X once said, going on with this topic, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. That's interesting. So we get to the last verses of the curses of Israel, and it says here, Deuteronomy 28:68, and we talked about this before. And the Lord shall bring thee into a land of bondage again, or a second Egypt, by way of ships. Ships, meaning ships like the slave ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, meaning the land of Africa, Israel. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, meaning slaves, and no man shall buy you, which in Old English is redeem or save you. In Luke 21:24, the words of Jesus himself, and they, the children of Israel, shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. After that moment, it says here, this is what Jesus said, after this moment, Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now, wait a minute. We are, in church, we always were taught that we are the Gentiles. Black people are the Gentiles. So how does Jesus say that after the children of Israel are led away into captivity into all nations, that Jerusalem is going to be taken over by the Gentiles until their time is going to be fulfilled? That doesn't, something's not clicking here, because if the Gentiles are currently in Jerusalem right now until the Son of Man comes back, then who are we? And we all know that in Israel right now, is you see the European Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, and you also have the Palestinians. So if they are all Gentiles, the Arabs and the Jews, then who are the people that have been scattered through slave trade from Africa to the many nations of the earth, as it is told in the Bible? So basically, it says here that Jesus is saying that we will not be allowed peacefully to return to the Holy Land until the second coming of Christ. This is when all, per the scriptures, his children will be brought back. Till then, blacks or his people will face discrimination and suppression all over the world. This goes for any black person descendant from Africa or the Hebrew Israelites. And again, here it says that the Lord shall bring them to Egypt, again by way of ships. Now, this is a picture of the slave ships. As the slaves were packed like sardines on, they were scattered all across the world. Now, we all know that the European Jews, when they were under the Holocaust, Hitler didn't put them on ships, because they were already in Germany. They were already in the Rhineland. They were already in Hungary and Poland and Russia. They were already in a landmass called Europe. So Hitler didn't need a ship. So, but this verse right here is talking about ships. Why is it talking about ships? Because the Bible foretold of the Hebrew Israelites being scattered by way of ships as slaves all across the world, as bondmen and bondwomen. Now this, folks, is real. The Jews, after the Holocaust, they came over to Israel in ships. But when they came over to Israel in ships, they were not slaves. They came with a lot of money, and they came and they actually got rid of and killed, slaughtered many Palestinians, because they said, this is our land. Now, ironically, the good ship Jesus was the name of a slave ship captained by Sir John Hawkins in 1564 by appointment of the Queen of England. Here's a picture of John Hawkins right here. So how is it that a ship comes called the good ship Jesus, and they come and their whole main intent is to put slaves on the ship, and then say that, this is your God. You guys are supposed to be slaves because you are cursed, and this is the picture of who you're supposed to worship, and we look like him. Everybody on the boat is black. The slave masters were white, and the ship was named Jesus. Isn't that ironic? Here we see the inspection of a slave Negro, and here we see. But the thing is, how can the European Jews be led captive into all nations, as the Bible says, and at the same time be the ones doing the enslaving? You can't be a slave master and a slave at the same time. Somebody's obviously lying. The truth needs to come out. Jewish people own slave ships. Here goes some proof right here. You got different ships. The ship Abigail. The owners were Aaron Lopez, Moses Levi, Jacob France. The name of the ship, Crown, the Crown ship, the Nassau ship, the Four Sisters, Antigua. You can only think where that's going. It's probably going to Antigua. Betsy, Polly, White Horse, Expedition, Charlotte, Prudent Betty. These are all slave ships. Slave ships that help regulate the slave trade. Now, as I was getting back to the ship part,